Hey, CBC, I hope you had a fantastic Christmas yesterday. It is the day after Christmas, and instead of gathering together as one big group, we have a conversation on this moment in our culture that we feel like is pretty unique. As the world slows down for about 7 days, we want to talk about what God has to say to us in that time. We want to talk about the idea of slowness and what it means for us, and maybe catch some principles moving forward about how we see and celebrate God's goodness when the world speeds back up again. So I hope and pray that this conversation is good for you and your families as we talk about seeing God's goodness in this specific time of year. All right, so hey, what do I want to talk about? We kicked around ideas, and we started talking about like another nuance of the Christmas story, and we all kind of got together a month ago and said, you know what? I feel like we have a moment right now in our culture when seemingly it slows down a little bit, and what does that look like? What can we do at that moment? What is God saying to us in that moment? So I guess we'll kick it off here. What does your life look like right now, and what does slowing down look like in your world in this next, mid-week or so between Christmas and New Year's?
2 times as much coffee as I normally would drink because I don't have anything else to do. It just keeps going.
Just keep going.
And it's time to play with the toys time, right?
Yeah.
This is when we test out all the toys, and I tell my mom what I want her to take back and give me gift cards instead. And that's what we do. That's the right routine.
Yeah. Like no kids practices and you homeschool, so every day is a school day.
Exactly. When we will be doing school today. That's just how homeschool works.
That's right. Man, I'm going to pray for your kids.
I feel like all I've been doing is cooking and getting ready for this moment. And so I love that I have leftovers. I had Chex Mix for breakfast and a cookie. So
crumbled in with the Chex Mix, maybe?
Oh, I might have to try that.
That might be good.
Yeah.
This year's extra special for us because we're moving into the new house.
Yeah.
So now that we're there, it's we've got family, and it's been chaos getting to this point. So we finally have a house, but at the same time, I've got a second job that slows down a little bit between Christmas and New Year's. So it's a more easy paced time. So we get to actually hang out with each other as coworkers. We get to know one another a little bit better while still having to be on call for whatever comes in. But it does give us a little bit of time. Going up to the end of the year is just bananas. It's crazy. We have nonstop business. Everybody's going every which way. Two ships passing in the night. You might not even see your coworkers for days at a time, and then all of a sudden it slows down. And so now we get to really kind of build into each other, have some time, and enjoy that. It's like that. You've been going, and all of a sudden you get to do that.
To exhale a little bit.
Exhale,
Yeah.
Well, Mark and I are opposites, right? Because this time of year is a nice rest for me. Groups aren't starting back for several weeks now because the spring semester is so much longer than the fall semester. Groups usually start a little bit later in January, so there's some breathing room. For my husband, on the other hand, this is his craziest time.
Yeah, I think that it's a smaller subset of people that probably speed up and don't slow down in this week or so. I'm just wondering, as I'm thinking about this, it brings to light because I watched a documentary this year. It's actually listening to a sermon by Brian Poppy, who's the rector of the Church of the Res that offices with CBC out of CBC. And he did a series on Sabbath, and it's one of my favorite topics. And, we did a Sabbath series a couple years ago. And so I gave it a listen just to see, honestly, if he was better than me. And he was really good. He had a line in there, and he said, sometimes if you want to catch up to God, you have to slow down. And I thought, man, that's really good. So I stopped him, and I said, Brian, this line was amazing. Full disclosure, I listened to it at 2 times speed.
That's what I was going to ask. How fast were you listening?
Yeah, and I felt a little convicted, but then I was like, well, just talk faster. But he said he actually got it from a movie. We'll link to it, drop it in the chat here, but it's called, it's all about this Anglican priest who learns how to slow down. And it follows his path. He actually went to work in the UK, and he got there, and he asked the rector that was there, where's my office? And the rector pointed to the streets and said, start walking. And so the whole thing's about him like walking and finding a slow pace and saying, this is where ministry's done. And so I think culturally, we have a week where our society, other than the other 51 weeks out of the year, doesn't try and speed up, but it intentionally shuts down. And so my question would be, why is slowness good for us? And let's start here. Where do we see slowness, not just as a concept, but as a design idea, as God, as creator? Where do we see slowness woven into the fabric of how God created the world to flourish and function?
Well, Tatum loves this week, right? Because I mean, like, she stays stressed all the time.
Yeah.
Like, and just to be able to like take a breath, like, and sleep late, and you know, she's definitely going to stay in her pajamas all day. Like, what's
Like a
real
week,
clothes?
not just day.
Right? Like, you know, it's this moment of just, you know, breathing and taking a break, because you kind of cram and live hoping for this moment.
Yeah.
In so many ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where else do we see it in God's design?
I kind of see it all. I mean, it's so prevalent throughout Scripture, right? Like from the very beginning all the way to the end, like there's this constant like opportunities that God places in our lives to be waiting for stuff.
Beginning being like, day 7, he rested kind of language.
Yeah. I mean, even the way that God created the world, I mean, the way he describes it, it's relatively simple and slow, right? Like it's the slow, methodical approach to creation where he's just doing it vocally instead of explaining every little intricate detail and how busy he was. It's just the slow, description of how the world was made. And that pattern, I feel like, is woven into us. And we see stories in the Scripture like Abraham and Sarah, like waiting for their baby, like waiting to have a child. Noah being told, build this ark, and then waiting a century for it to actually rain.
You can even, I hadn't thought of this right now, but you can even make a case that a lot of slowness is restraint, and we always focus on the rest of God being on the seventh day, but God could have created everything on one day.
Yeah.
He could have just said like, and go.
Right.
But he waited for 7 days and restrained himself. And so if we are tying the concept of restraint and slowness together, we get this picture that God is slowly creating, even though 6 days, everything seems like it'd be a lot, but for God, it wasn't. So he kind of slowly created and said, on this day, we're going to do fish.
Let's say there's one main focus.
There's
one main focus.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me.
Not like a million different things at the same time.
So even before we get to that day, 7th day, that everybody highlights for good reason, there is slowness built in before then, but how he created and then functionally how we're supposed to, show God's good creation to the rest of creation.
We were just talking at Kidman, earlier this month, starting out Advent, about the prophets and 400 years. So think about, and then 40 years with Moses. Think about all the times that there were years, not hours, not days, years.
But even go back to, the boat and Noah. We say 40 days, 40 nights. But they were on that thing for a year.
Yeah.
They just waited, and they sent out animals that didn't come back. And they just, it says there was no more rain. So they literally drifted for a year. And slowly, that would be infuriating.
Yeah.
On a boat.
On a boat. Yeah.
They probably never lived with our speed, though, so they probably didn't quite know the difference.
Probably didn't know the difference.
There were no 2x speed podcasts on the boat.
They had to listen to all their podcasts at one
Normal
time speed.
Stop it. That technology wasn't
infuriating.
It's terrible.
Yeah,
On
it was
tapes.
terrible. On tapes.
Well, I think when you first brought this up, I think my first reaction was like, oh, Rest, like, I'm terrible at that. Like, what am I going to have to say about that?
I blame my daughter. That's what I'm mad at resting.
Kids. We can blame
She
it
doesn't
on-
let me.
We can blame it on kids
Can
for
we? Thank
sure, or like all the different things that we have to do. But then I was thinking about like, my sister made a comment to me the other day that she was trying to get better about even using some of her vacation time, like while the kids are at school, for herself to catch up. And like, I think there's just some of, at least for me, we're not like intentional, but when I am planning ahead, but when I see Jesus with large crowds and small crowds, he took time away. And I wonder if he could kind of feel that of like, okay, now I've been with a large group, or, I've been on, and now I need to pull away and go. So like, I tend to wait until I've kind of been laid out.
It's kind of like in our
crash and
culture.
burn.
In our culture, it's seemingly we let slowness be dictated to us instead of intentionally seek it out. And so it's dictated to us this week.
Right.
Yeah.
But in a week, it's going to be dictated that we speed back up again. And seemingly, Jesus said, "No, I am going to do more to dictate the pace in which I live in a world. In this world, it's one of my favorite notes in the Gospels that we never see Jesus run ever. Dude walked all over the place, but we never see. Actually, the scriptures never say he was even in a hurry. which is astounding to me. Andy, you brought up the example of the kids in Jesus.
Yeah, so you've got Jesus, he's dealing with all the people. He's surrounded by crowds. They've figured out that he can heal. He's feeding a bunch of people. People want some free lunches. He's surrounded. And then there are these kids that want to get over to Jesus. And his disciples are like, whoa, man, it's too busy. You're going to have to make an appointment. It's not going to happen, right?
Yeah, make it talk to his secretary.
That's right.
Yes.
Well, we'll do lunch. But Jesus steps aside, and pushes everybody else aside and says, no. These kids, you have to enter the kingdom just like these kids. If you don't, you're missing out. And that's important, that in the middle of all of that, in the middle of everything, I think that something that God designed with us is that we miss the deeper things. We miss the greater, like you build flavor when you slow cook certain things, and
there's no shortcut to caramelizing an onion. None. There's
true.
none. It takes an hour per onion. If you have 2 or 3, it'll take you an hour and a half. And there is no shortcut. I've tried them all. We've tried them all.
That's right. We've tried them all.
That's right.
And that's just how God designed the world to work. And so when you hurry, you miss the people.
It's like when you hurry and you skip out on slowness, you shortcut yourself from the depth of experience that this life should be. And I go back to even in the garden, right? If we're going to use that as an example, as a prescriptive method to talk about how life should be. God walked with Adam and Eve in the coolness of the day. This idea that he slowly is going to. I think about Jesus and how it's still, this is why the incarnation is one of my favorite things to talk about. And I know Easter's really big in our faith, rightfully so. But the fact that God came near and just came near and for 30 years walked with people. And that hits on so many different levels for me. One is he knew what he created in the first place, and he knew how far it had fallen. And that had to be infuriating for Jesus to walk in the middle of the mess and be like, this was never what I thought it was going to be, what I wanted it to be, right? And then 2 is he just slowly did it, that blows me away. I cannot imagine that experience from Jesus. I cannot imagine. But then why he did it, I think, is to show us the value in that. And to show us the value in what happens when we slow down. So let's go there next. If we talk about this moment culturally that is by nature slower, and we talk about that slowness isn't just a thing, it is a designed element of how God created us to function and flourish. What do we miss when we don't slow down? What's the cost? What's the casualty?
I think we miss connection a lot of times, right? Like if we're always trying to move quickly past this moment to the next moment, we're missing the potential for connection in those moments, right? Like if we're not really trying to enjoy what we're experiencing and taking it in an intentionally slow way, I think we can miss the connection that exists in those moments, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I was thinking, like when you said it, I was going to say the same thing, connection, right? Because I was just thinking about vacation time when you take my favorite vacation is taking a week at the beach where you do nothing but sit in a chair.
Yep.
That is my nightmare.
Yeah.
That is indeed.
So our very first one, Mark was man, he was so nervous about it. He was thinking he was going to organize a beach cleanup on day one. He's going to do all this stuff. But really, he likes it now. But, the reason that I think I like it so much is because some of our best conversations have come on day 3 or 4. After we've really fully leaned into slowing down. You just don't connect with people in deep and meaningful ways. The ways that are you don't have the conversations with people that are the most important ones after dinner before you are trying to get something cleaned up and get ready for bed, and you don't have those conversations until you've really slowed down enough to think about your connections and your relationships. So yeah, it's connection.
There's so much you miss. So I heard this, and then in Germany, we drove on the Autobahn, and your vision changes. So as you're going slow, you can see all kinds of detail in the countryside and whatever. And then as you go faster and faster, and you get up to about 120
kilometers per hour.
That's
That's like the on-ramp speed.
Oh my gosh.
you get tunnel vision, and you don't see anything beside you. And so even though you're driving through this beautiful countryside, you don't get to see any of it because you're driving so fast. And don't get me wrong, that's a thrill in and of itself, but you miss a lot. And nothing illustrates that more than taking a walk. I'm sure this is the way that Eleanor is right now. When I take a walk with AJ, he doesn't have a whole lot of words. Part of that's because Jamie's speaking English, I'm speaking German. He's trying to sort it out. So he just does a lot of this, da, 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 and he points at different things. And a lot of times There are things that you wouldn't notice, you wouldn't care about. It's just a tree. It's just whatever. But to him, it's something that is almost, I mean, it's awe-inspiring. And so much of that only occurs if you walk at about his speed and you really take the time to look around. And I think that's one of the things that we do.
Yeah, I was walking with Eleanor a couple days ago, and we have this loop that we do. And so we're doing this loop, and I start the loop off by saying, let's get done with the loop so I can check this box, and she'll get more tired, so she'll sleep, and I can feel the freedom of not having kids for an hour a day. And, and so we're walking, and my goal is, hey, let's keep going. And she's like, no, I'm tired. I'm just going to sit here. And so 4 or 5 times she just sat in the middle of the street. She's like, no, I'm good for right now. And then she gets up. She's like, okay, let's walk again. And that pace, and she stops and picks up these little blowy flowers. It's a really beautiful reminder of what you just said, all the things that I miss, because my goal is to get done as quickly as I can so that I can move on to the next thing, so that I can get done as quickly as I can so I can move on to the next thing. Yeah. It's a cycle, right?
I was reading this thing the other day. It just keeps striking me about eye contact and how important eye contact is to our soul and to feel connected. And the busier I get, and even the more stressed I get, I might more mindlessly scroll on my phone, or like you're just kind of going in on yourself a little bit, right? And if you're in a rush, you're not making eye contact with people, versus like really slowing down to like appreciate the quirks of people and people watch. And even Tyler last night was talking to us in the car, and oh my goodness, guys, the detail that he was pouring into this. And I just thought, and then I was trying to talk to Kevin about something else, and I put my phone down and I was just trying to focus, and I was just reflecting back to him what I was hearing him say or whatever. I was like, okay, stop. He is the most important thing, and this story is going on very long, but, just try to reflect back, and oh my gosh, he just beamed, his eyes, his body. I thought, oh man, how often do I, in my rush, miss that moment?
So tell me if I'm wrong, because I think I know the book that you're reading.
Yes.
Isn't the author's point that unless we have connection with people like that, we really don't connect with God?
Yes.
What book is this?
The other half.
Yeah, the other half of the church, Jim Wilder.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
He's making the point that we don't attach to God if we don't attach to people. Like we need connection with people in order to actually really genuinely connect with God.
And I was going to say,
Because that was community. That's what you
that's
started
right.
out wanting was the
and-
community. And that's really what was broken, was the connection in the beginning.
And I was going to say,
the
what you said too. I mean, when we miss so often the perspective that slowness brings with it, it not only lets us enjoy the connection with the people around us, but then we start to realize that God is the giver of this connection.
Yeah.
And so it just deepens and widens our relationship, our perspective, our joy, of all those things of this good God that allowed all this to happen. And so we just miss it. We miss all that, not just with people, but with the God who gives these
And
things.
I think another book they were talking about, which I think is funny because none of us at this table yet are grandparents. I don't think, right? And
Not that we know yet, but we certainly are hoping.
Hey, hold on, real quick.
They were
As an
talking
aside,
about,
does it Mark send you a text? Does it Mark send you a text? Can I say this?
Since the kids,
He sends the kids a text, and what is it?
it's a one-word text. They all know it. They get it periodically. It's one word. Hurry.
Only about kids.
Yeah, grandkids.
That's really
Hurry up,
funny.
give me
Grandkids.
That is amazing.
And they were talking about, though, but this feeds perfectly. They were just talking about, like, ideally, grandparents kind of match the tender loving of God. Because if you ever watched a grandparent that is all about when they get handed that grandbaby in that moment, they like light up, and the world, like to your Autobahn, the world becomes them. I mean, it just zeroes in, and nothing else matters. Even though those same people were the ones that raised you and that were like, let's go, go, go. The grandkids come on scene, and they're in a different season. They're in a different.
I told you a
So
story
how do we
about
embrace that?
the first day that my mom looked after Eleanor. So I love this story. So, we were going to work. She came over to the house, and it was the first day she took care of her. And I get home, and I said, hey, Mom, how's the day? And she looked at me in the eye, and she said, I think this was the best day of my life. And I said, you spent how many days with me, raising me? She just said, sorry, and walked away. Because she was in a different life stage where she could be like, this is
she
beautiful.
was in that moment. And I also think, don't you think just the older you get, the more you do appreciate and maybe realize the time and the gifts and the rushing becomes less
That's right.
important the further on you go.
So let's ask the other side of the question. So if slowness is good, if in our lack of slowness, the cost of that, of hurriedness, is the depth of connection with those around us and with God, why are we so bad at slowing down? We're terrible at it. I'm really, really awful at it. Culturally, we're very bad at it. Why? Different cultures are better. In Europe, they're way better at it. They stop. The Spanish culture is amazing at it. They take naps every day. They get up late. But we are really bad at slowing down. Why?
I think it's a really good question. I wonder if some of it's kind of the Western, like individualism, like pull myself up by my bootstraps,
Sure.
like it's all
Yep.
on me to go perform.
It's got to be not Western though. That would be distinctly American because the Europe is considered the West, right?
Yeah, sure.
Maybe American.
So it would
Yep.
have to be American culture. But how much of it is a function of affluence? So I heard this recently that we talk about inequality, and then you get the difference between what we have now. The iPhone that I have is the same that Bill Gates has. The computer that I have, barring anything crazy, is the same thing that Bill Gates has.
And we get it. You're a big deal.
Well, what I'm saying is that we all enjoy a certain level of affluence,
Yeah.
you jerk. But we enjoy that level of affluence, and so we have all of these things at our disposal. So we aren't doing things like that would normally slow us down, like washing dishes. We stick those in the
for sure.
dishwasher. We aren't washing clothes. We aren't. So
We're not
we've
walking
got,
places.
We've got
We're-
all of
yeah,
we've got all
yeah.
of these things that would be by any stretch of the imagination 50 years ago. At the very minimum,
Would build
I mean,
in.
would
Dude, the Instant Pot is a great example.
right. And
Like
so-
it takes cook times that should be 3 hours and it makes it 22 minutes.
And then we fill in that time with stuff.
Yeah.
We fill in that time with things that we don't sit and allow that to become
that's
leisure and to sit and spend time reading or spending time with God or spending time with each other. We fill it with other additional entertainment things because we have the capacity to do that, because we have
like
the
that.
affluence to do that.
Not only that, I mean, like, who wants to say to somebody, I'm lazy, right? Like, you want to say to somebody, I'm busy,
Yeah.
right? Like, you don't feel like you're important.
It
You don't
seems like
feel
a
you're
a
carrying
badge
weight.
of honor. Like, I'm really busy, which means I'm important.
In Christian
and I've got
culture
stuff
too,
to do.
I've read it said that out of all the 10 commandments, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy is the only one we brag about breaking.
Yeah.
It's like, I have to work every day of the week. That's how important I am. We never say, guys, I have lied so much today. No, we say, I worked so hard. And it's the only one who brag about breaking.
We've also grown up around stimulation.
Yeah.
Ultimately. So unlike any other generation, really previous to these last couple, we had a TV, in the living room. So there was a TV on.
All the
Whereas
time.
before that, it was a radio, which is a little bit easier to tune out than the TV. And before that, it was a record player. You didn't even have the radio, And before that, there was even less. And so, I mean, we've grown up around stimulation, and so I think that we have to discipline ourselves. I'm the worst at this. To not have stimulation just for a little bit. To do what.
Yeah.
The exhale, just
Yeah. I think too, I always go back to this quote and specifically talking about Sabbath, but this one author just talked about why we're so bad at it. And it really is it's a commentary on our ability to recognize that there are things in this world that we can't control. So she writes and she says that we don't Sabbath because we don't like admitting there are spaces in my life that I have no control over. And so she said the reason why we need to is because when we stop working so hard in the world, we start to realize that the world's not ours to begin with. And I love that idea. So I think all those things are true. I think sometimes it's a measure of control. I don't slow down because if I slowed down, I'd have to come to grips with the things that probably wouldn't change if I didn't slow down in the first place. That makes sense. This idea that there's more that I have to admit to myself in the mirror that I can't control. And by slowing down, either have to look at that, or I have to realize that my hurriedness got me no farther than it would have otherwise. Yeah, so I think we're really bad at it in our culture. So let's ask another question then. If we're really bad at it, but it's really good for us, and then like you said, Mark is in a place where it's really busy for him, the world's going to speed back up again really quickly. In 2 weeks, there'll be practices on the calendar, and there'll be all the school calendar full, and we're launching into a brand new year with brand new resolutions, and more often than not, resolutions are just places for us to fill spaces in our life again, right? And so how do we, outside of this week, because I think this week's a gift, where it causes us to stop and say, this is slowness. God is good at slowness. God designed us to be slower than maybe we are. So how do we keep going from here? How do we carry the mentality of slowness forward outside of this week, or maybe even in this week if our jobs are really busy? How do we keep it going?
I think for me, the first thing that I think of is maybe so we do have this forced time, like you're saying, this is the time where we're resting, right? Like the world is intentionally kind of shutting down a little bit. And we know that we can't take this exactly and keep replicating it, every month. Every month I'm going to take 8 days off in a row, like that's, well, I don't know. Can we?
I don't know. I mean, we
Not,
could ask.
you know
for
what?
it.
If you do that, I'm gonna give you a lot more days than that off in a row.
Fair enough.
I'm gonna give you a ton of days off in a row.
So
Try
we
it.
can't replicate this exactly, but I think we can remember what we've done here and remember the value of it and try to intentionally inject, little microcosms of this into our busy schedules. Like I think about how every week, 3 days a week, I drive my daughter to ballet 45 minutes there and 45 minutes back. And normally I might think of that as an annoyance or a frustration, like God, I'm on the road so much. But if I'm thinking about it in this context, like really, that's an amazing gift that God has given me that I would normally not have an opportunity to just sit with my daughter for 45 minutes at a time where there's nothing else to distract us. Like it's just her and I.
Yeah.
And I think if I'm taking this mentality into that, I can think of that as this wonderful gift that I know one day I'm going to miss. Like once she gets her driver's license, Carrie, I'll never have it again and I'm going to miss it. And I don't want to miss that. I want to enjoy it while God has blessed me with it.
I mean, isn't it just about so much of it is about seeing the moments that we have as opportunities for and from God? It's the whole idea of Israel in the Old Testament, the stones. Everybody else walked by those stones. They're like, cool, stones. But they walked by and they said, no, this is a reminder that God did something here. And so when life speeds up, like you said about perspective, we forget. So quickly we forget the goodness of slowness. And so how do you isolate a couple moments in your week and say, this is going to be one of those monument sign moments where I remember that this is a good for us and it causes us to stop down and be slow in the middle of the chaos and the crazy. Yeah, it's good.
I think everybody being different, you got to figure out what works for you, and then you have to be intentional about setting those things up. So I was listening to a podcast about a number of things, and they mentioned something about Orthodox Jews and how they prepare for the Sabbath. So Sabbath starts at sundown on Friday and ends at sundown on Saturday. What that means is you have to get through the whole evening, and depending on your interpretation, you can't do anything. I mean, you can't knead dough, you can't, bake bread. I mean, you can't turn things on and off.
Light
and so
switches,
they got to go figure out the light switches that they need that are going to facilitate them getting the rest of their evening done. And so I think that that's something that we have to do, is figure out what light switches we got to leave on so that we can spend time doing the things we know with God. And in certain instances, so right now in the season, just like you, I'm not driving to ballet practice yet, but those walks are great. I can take my son, go hand in hand, and we can just take a walk. And that's something that I get to pray over him and talk to him, and that's one of the things that for me forces me to slow down. I turn the phone off and I just.
Well, even that action there of turning the phone off, you said it when you talked about kind of the Jewish nature of Sabbath is right now slowness is forced upon us and life's going to speed up, but we need to prepare for slowness. It takes a work beforehand to actually happen. Otherwise we'll default into the rhythms of the world around us, which is not slowness. And even if we have the slowness, it's probably not appreciated slowness that we use to invest in growing our relationship with others and with God. So I think it's to really, prepare for it and mark those things that are those moments for you and say, this is how I can set them up to remind me to be slow. I like that.
Well, and I was thinking, I think too, like this is a good time to just have an honest evaluation of kind of your rhythms during the week. And like when I kind of looked at it, I realized, oh my goodness, I've got one kid that wakes up before 6 o'clock, and then I have a teenager that is going to bed at 11 or 12. And so I feel on the whole day, right? For people coming with needs or interruptions or whatever. And so two things that I kind of been doing. One is it's like 3 minutes to get from my house, maybe 5 to the church. And instead of turning on anything, I just like take a moment when I kind of get in the car and I can just kind of talk to God a little bit, or I'm just quiet. Like I'm not trying to be super spiritual. Like I just realized I just felt like I was constantly on and there was just noise all the time. And so you
just drive in silence?
I just drive in silence. And but I check my body on just, are my shoulders down, my head back. Like we'd kind of be amazed, I think, just by how much stress like we carry, especially when we drive. And then the other thing is like, I'm not a morning person at all. And then once the kids got off to school, usually I'm like on it, like I got a list a mile long and I got to go. And we started this Ignatius journey and I've loved it. And I started a different rhythm. Like I realized I didn't want to be interrupted. I really wanted it to be my time. So the only way to do that was wait till everybody was gone. And even though I wanted to dive into my day, I've put that right there in that time. And so I start out, sometimes it takes 15 minutes, sometimes it's 45, sometimes it's an hour. There's a candle I light. I have a hot chocolate and a water. Like I just have a whole moment of just going into stillness. And it really has changed a lot of the rest of my day of what kind of comes back up. And I think God just kind of honors that I'm prioritizing that first.
you said,
When everything in me wants to go,
Right.
go, 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 go.
It's not I'm going to fit stillness in when I can. It's I'm going to do stillness and then fit the other things
Right.
around it. That's
Because
good.
I wasn't going to get it otherwise.
Yeah.
I just wasn't.
And I think it changes your mentality in the middle of it too.
Yeah.
Instead of, like I said, the walks, instead of I got to get through this because I got other things, I'm going to do this. And then that's good. Yeah, I like that a lot.
I think, I'm always promoting counseling. One of the things that, our counselor says to us all the time is if you don't find the value in the change, you're not going to make the change.
Yeah.
Right?
Good.
Like, why is the change that you're pursuing or I'm asking you to make, why is that going to be valuable? Right? Until you actually value slowness, you're not going to pursue it.
But
You can say it's good, but you're not going to do it.
it's my favorite definition of change is change only happens when the pain of the status quo becomes greater than the pain of the perceived change.
Right.
It's that idea of changing a car tire is you're not going to change it, but then all of a sudden if you're like this thing's going to pop, I'm going to go to Discount Tire tomorrow.
Right. And nobody in our culture is going to help us value it.
That's right.
You gotta know that, right? And so, and you gotta, really understand that God's never in a hurry. And, he's telling the story of redemption and he's taken 4,000-ish years, right? To tell it. And we're thinking, man, this is slow.
Yeah.
But maybe in the light of eternity, maybe it's not slow. I wonder if we'll look back 100 million years from now and go, oh, that was actually pretty quick.
It was really fast.
That was really
And
fast.
similar to what you're saying too, like think about the people that make you feel the most valued. Some of those people are some of the slowest and unhurried.
Yeah.
Like they lean into you. They don't seem like they're in a rush to go get their to-do list done. And I'm so bad at that. But think about
Right.
Sharon Gelnitz and there's just some people that can come to mind. They made you in that moment feel, and that's how God feels about us. And then that's
Right.
what we can
So God
do
feels
for
about
the
us.
people,
It's
you know?
huge.
Right. And so that's exactly what I was talking about. Like until we find the value in doing it, until we realize that God values it. And that is what makes us feel loved by God. That's what brings us connection to other people. We're not going to do it.
Yeah.
And so you have to, number one, value it. Number two, you've got to find ways to actually really incorporate it and like push against the need to hurry. Like whatever it is for you, whether it's like trying to drive the speed limit, trying to come to a full stop at a stop sign, trying to get in the longest line at the grocery store. I don't know what it is for you, but just taking intentional time, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, like saying, right now, I'm just going to be slow. I'm going to breathe deep. Like you said in the car, I'm going to pay attention to my body posture, my muscles, my breathing. I'm just going to slow down. And it changes us. It does.
I do love how much, those things you said are really small. Get in the longest line at the grocery store, drive the speed limit, stop fully at stop signs. Those are really small changes, but it's amazing how those small changes over time lead to large changes in our lives and how we think and how we feel and how we relate. I think that's why we're doing this, is because we all sat down and recognized that we have a moment here that reflects God in ways that our culture doesn't value. And so oftentimes we miss those parts of God. And so what would it look like if we just stopped and we said slowness is something that shouldn't just be valued in a week between the two big holidays, but should be something that marks followers of Jesus. Because in the slowness we find connection. In the slowness we find depth. In the slowness we find out that God is in control of the things we can't. Those things only happen when we stop and slow down. And so my hope and prayer this week as we share this with our people is that we be a church that encourages slowness. That encourages slowness so that we might stop and see more of a God who loves us. And I think the best picture of this is just like God just stops and looks at you and says, you are what I want. And that's enough for me. And that's how he loves us. And that's hopefully how we can love others around us. So this week, wherever you're watching from, it's our hope and prayer that you find ways to facilitate slowness into your life, recognizing that it's modeled after a God who loves you very much, and that we might be a place that as we slow down, we finally catch up to the speed of God. Thanks for joining us, guys. Next week, we have another conversation as we launch into our January spiritual discipline of feasting and fasting. I can't wait to start it. Have a great day.